Residential Report Writing and Case Studies, Chapter 4, the Uniform Residential Appraisal Report, page 27. URAR, page 2, Sales Comparison Analysis section, continued again. Data collection and analysis are also required in order to identify the number of comparable sales that have sold during the past 12 months in the subject neighborhood. Once again, comparable is the key word for this required information. The same example used above is applicable here. Additional research may be necessary to compile all the comparable sales that have sold during the past year. However, you should already be looking at this information for selection of your comparable sales to be used in the sales comparison approach. Furthermore, the number of comparable listings and sales indicated at the top of page 2 should also be consistent with the numbers of properties indicated on the 1004 MC addendum form. End of page. Chapter 4, the Uniform Residential Appraisal Report, page 28, Sales Comparison Grid. Sales Comparison Grid. For the analysis grid, the secondary market appraisal guidelines specify at least 3 comparable sales be used, preferably closed within the past 6 months that are locationally similar to the subject property. The comparable sales should be as similar as possible to the subject in terms of quality, condition, age, and size. If the comparable sales are older than 6 months, Fannie Mae requires the appraiser to comment on the necessity of using dated sales for comparison purposes. The appraiser may use older sales, pending sales, etc. as additional comparables, number 4, number 5, and number 6, to provide support for the indication of value. These are all supplemental guidelines, as USPAP does not establish specific requirements for selection of comparable sales. Current underwriting guidelines often require an appraiser to provide at least 2 sales that are closed within the last 90 days and/or provide 2 listings or pending sale properties adjusted out on the sales comparison grid. According to USPAP, the appraiser must collect, verify, and analyze all information necessary to produce credible results. Further, when the sales comparison approach is necessary for credible results, the appraiser must analyze such comparable sales as are available to indicate a value conclusion. This means the appraiser is ultimately responsible for the selection of comparable sales. The appraiser should consider the guidelines and rules established by the client and intended users for comparable sales selection. However, the appraiser must not allow these guidelines and rules to result in a biased or non-credible indication of value. This section may be the most critical of all the sections of the appraisal report because the sales grid summarizes the support for your final opinion of value. The sales comparison approach is the mandatory approach on all appraisals for 1 to 4 family property loans that are to be sold to Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac. This is also the approach that lends itself to major errors of judgment, which reflect on your competency. The sales comparison approach stands alone as the single most important source of basic information as extracted from the market. This approach serves as the primary or sole basis for your opinion of value. Some of the more common problems encountered or revealed in reviewing this approach to value are identified below. Inadequate sales market data, research not thorough. Lack of research for financing concessions of the comparable sales. Use of a comparable sale with too much dissimilarity. Use of a comparable sales outside the neighborhood without adequate explanation. Use of a sale that is not comparable to the subject property. Misstating comparable sale information and then adjusting accordingly. Failure to identify verification sources. Missing or misstated date of sale information for the comparable sale. Misstated level of condition for the subject or comparable sales. Significant inconsistency between the improvement analysis on page 1 and the condition rating on the sales grid. Non-specific information inserted in the sales grid to mislead. Quality of construction manipulated. For instance, by using brick comparable sales for a frame subject. GLA of comparable sales understated to show positive adjustments. Contributory adjustments not consistent and or supportable from the market. Use of numerous positive adjustments intended to maximize the value. Failure to analyze and explain adjustments properly, especially adjustments for location, quality, and condition. Exceeding the net adjustment guidelines without adequate explanation. Exceeding the gross adjustment guidelines without adequate explanation. Many of our clients' requirements relate directly to the secondary market guidelines. If your client wants to sell the mortgage in the secondary market, he or she will have to comply with their rules. Most clients have established a guideline of 15% for the net adjustment totals and 25% for the gross adjustment totals per the secondary market's guidelines. This is not absolute. It is recognized that the appraiser may exceed these guidelines on occasion. If the guidelines must be exceeded, an explanation is required in the appraisal report. For example, this may have been the most current or most similar comparable sale within the subject's immediate neighborhood, even though the net or gross percentage adjustments totals were exceeded. The client needs to understand why the appraiser used comparable sales that exceeded their established adjustment guidelines. End of page.